Hello everybody, welcome back to the How to Make Money from Excel series. How are you? Good to be with you today. It's a lovely day outside, and today we're going to be talking about, well, we know we've got to market ourselves, we've got to find customers, but we should also be selective about who we work with. Yes, if you're not asking the right questions at the beginning of your Excel project, at the beginning of your consultancy project, then you might find you're wasting time. You might find you're working with the wrong people. You might even find yourself in a situation where you don't get paid for a project. I have definitely wasted a lot of time over the years trying to set up projects with the wrong kind of people. So we are going to cover these bases today. Let me know if you're watching live. Can you see me and can you hear me? It's good to be with you today. Let's get into the chat quickly, see who's with us. Ian Lamb is with us from Edinburgh. Welcome, Ian. One of our members, of course. Good to have you with us. Peter is with us. So Peter says he's going to post his freezer drawer contents tracker. That does sound useful. That sounds like a kind of Internet of Things type VBA application. So fantastic stuff. Looking forward to that. Frank is with us today. Welcome, Frank. How are you? And Thomas from South Africa is with us. And we're going to look through Thomas's file today in order to discuss the 5 points that we raised in the static video we released yesterday. Paul is with us. Welcome, Paul. How are you? Have you got a beer on today, Paul? Let me know. David is with us from South Africa as well. Over in Pretoria, welcome. Klaus is with us. Welcome, Klaus. Tom is with us too, another one of our members. Thank you for your membership, Tom. Good to have you with us. And thank you for Thomas for saying that the audio and video are great. So as usual, we've got 5 points to consider. We've got 7 topics in the series. For each topic, we've got 5 points to consider. And once again, thank you to Thomas. You can see at the top of the screen on the file name. Thank you to Thomas for sending in the file. We're going to talk through these one by one. I do want to show you one thing quickly. These are Thomas's cats. Aren't they lovely? So this is the Duke and the Duchess. So just to give you a little bit of context there on Thomas, at least on Thomas's cats. But Thomas is thinking about how to make more money out of Excel, and he's got a good amount of experience in Excel, but how can we really leverage that and make it central to your career, push your career forward? And we're thinking about, are you working with the right people on Excel projects? I know this from bitter experience really of trying to set up Excel projects. You know, when you start a new company, well, I don't know if you know or not, but when I started the company, I had lots of enthusiasm going and talking to lots and lots of people. I was let down so many times. Well, I say I was let down. I think it was actually my fault to some extent that I was letting myself have hope that a project would take place at all, when I know, looking back now with the experience I've got, that project was never going to happen for one reason or another. They don't have a budget. They have another system that they're actually going to use. There's no champion for me in the company. They want to use the file in a way that Excel can't really do. We're going to go through these one by one. So what I recommend, your first kind of filter should be when you're having this conversation. Yeah, this person has got in touch with me. Is it going to be a customer, or is it just somebody who wants some advice? You know, where are they coming from? Ask, how did they find you? Yeah, there's different ways that they could find you, of course. Could be a referral from a previous customer. That's probably a good sign that they're interested in paid work. Could be through your online content. We know in this series, we've got to be creating online content. Then I would be less certain probably that they want to actually have some paid work with you. Maybe it's a Google search. And I often find that if people find you with Google searches, so if you're doing online content, you're going to rank quite highly in Google search if you're doing the right amount of online content at least. I find if people come through Google search, they're often serious people who have a budget, who want to do a project. So make sure you ask them, how did they find you? I find this is also a good question when you're having this initial conversation with a customer, to kind of balance the conversation a bit so that it's not all one way. So that it's not you just explaining who you are and you explaining how you might go about the project. It's a good way to kind of reframe the situation to remind the customer, listen, for this to work, both of us have got to give a little bit and reveal some information. So I find it's a good question to ask, and I find it's unproblematic. people are usually very happy to reveal, if you like, how they've found you. So let's see what Thomas is saying about this point. In 2011, got a headphone problem here maybe. In 2011, I did training for another department in the same company. There you go. This person sat in for a short while and was impressed with my knowledge of Excel. You know what that tells me? You've got to be doing your best job all of the time, because you don't know who's watching. And yeah, I'll be honest with you. I have been a little bit disappointed with this series in terms of the number of viewers. Just a little bit disappointed, but bear in mind, I've been in this game a long time. I've been doing YouTube a long time. I'm used to this kind of sense of disappointment, and you shouldn't obsess about the viewer numbers anyway. But if you compare to the previous series we did, we haven't had many viewers. Does that mean I'm not going to do a good job? Does it mean I'm not going to be on time? Does it mean I'm not going to have good content for you guys? Absolutely not. I do the best job every time. Even when we had a single viewer, I did a live stream once where we had one viewer watching. It's all the same. You've got to do a good job. Online content, training, whatever it is. And this is what we can see from Thomas here, because Thomas is doing a training session. You can let me know in the chat, Thomas. Was it kind of just a standard training session? You know, my job, there's work that I really enjoy doing, and there's work that's just kind of standard work that's kind of less sexy, glamorous stuff, but you've still got to do a good job on that, because you never know who's watching. And in this training session that Thomas was doing, somebody else was watching, and bang, that person wants a project. So there's a little lesson for us. It's not something I've noted down, but we've got to be doing our best job. Even if we think nobody's watching, we've got to be doing our best job. So let's get into the chat here. So how did they find you? You've got to ask your prospective customer. Let's get into the chat here. Who's with us today? Paul says no beer today. Come on, Paul. It's Saturday. Just a juice. Welcome to TA9WA, Rayain. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name there, but thank you for being with us today. And Thomas says, thank you for sharing Duke and Duchess, Thomas. I had to share them. Absolutely gorgeous animals. And we've got a few cats on the channel, because we've got Jasfin's cats as well. And obviously I'm always going on about dogs. So it's an animal friendly zone, I think. So let's move on to point 2. We're talking about the questions you should be asking prospective customers to make sure that you're going to have a good project. So what is the current data landscape? And let's get into this point with another kind of anecdote from my experience. Last year, I had somebody get in touch with me, seemed to be a very serious inquiry, information in the email, and then they wanted to talk on the phone. That's another filter that I apply. I say, let's talk on the phone. If people don't want to talk on the phone, that usually means they're not serious about doing a project. So I had good email, wanted to talk on the phone, had a good conversation on the phone, but you've got to find out about the broader context. And I only found out about this context by being proactive and asking the question. So it was all sounding good. The prospective client seemed to be loving it. And then I was like, okay, what's the kind of context to this project? Are you just looking to upgrade an existing system, upgrade an existing spreadsheet? And this prospective customer said to me, no, we're actually looking at 2 or 3 possible options here. So I was thinking, oh, we're going to go straight into a project. I was wrong. Actually, they were just looking at options. They were considering Excel. They were considering some other software platforms as well. So suddenly, you know, that changes the dynamic of the conversation, doesn't it, somewhat? So I'm saying you've got to ask, what is the current data landscape? You've got to get some context. What are the existing systems? What systems are going to be changed? And just with reference to that example, are they looking at other possible systems? Another thing to think about in my notes here, are other systems in the pipeline that could make your file obsolete? And I had this a couple of years ago. We actually completed the project in this case, and this was for a big multinational organization, so I don't feel too guilty about wasting somebody's money in this case. But we completed the project. Client was really happy with it. It was some of my best work, and I'll tell you, it was one of my method statement files. So I've mentioned previously in the series, I've done lots of method statements for engineering type companies. And then I got in touch with him 6 months later and he said, yeah, we've actually brought in a new system now. So in that case, it wasn't harmful to me in a material sense. You know, I got paid, but it was harmful to me in terms of my long-term relationship with that company because they simply moved away from Excel. So we've got to be thinking holistically, got to be thinking about context, and make sure you're being proactive here. As I said, it shouldn't be a one-way conversation, this. It shouldn't be a job interview, though you should be trying to impress as far as possible. It shouldn't feel like a job interview. And this is another one of the questions that I really recommend you ask when you're having these conversations with prospective customers. So let's see what Thomas is saying here. I feel well equipped in this area. Thomas is saying the company was using Excel on a small scale and wanted to expand the use of the program to all divisions. Absolutely. So that's an example of where an Excel project, you know, seems like it's going to work well, where a company is happy using Excel. You know, in that situation, I would want to make the company aware of the limitations of Excel. If you're thinking of having a broader role for Excel, you've got to be aware of the limitations in terms of collaboration. You know, VBA applications don't work very well when multiple people are trying to use them at the same time. And also in terms of data, if you've got a big data set, more than 400,000 or 500,000 rows, then it could be problematic in Excel. If you can tick those two boxes, and the client is okay, then really the sky's the limit in terms of VBA and the VBA applications there. So ask about the current data landscape. Michelle, just checking into the chat here. Welcome, Michelle. Fantastic to have you with us. Long time no see, as you say. And yeah, Michelle, how's your YouTube channel going as well? I know that you have a YouTube channel. Is it about knitting? Have I got that wrong, Michelle? You let me know in the chat. And Thomas says, yeah. So just illustrating my previous point about always do a good job. Thomas says, yeah, I was just doing a basic Excel training session. So, you know, might not be particularly exciting for Excel trainers, but Thomas doing a great job, and somebody spotted that and bang, we got another project. 13 people watching with 5 likes. Thank you so much. Let me just quickly do my advertising. So Members Monday is on Monday. Yeah, and let me tell you, after this series, I'll have a short YouTube break. So the only way to get your weekly or periodic Tiger Hit will be to be in the membership area. Members Monday, you get weekly live stream. You get what we call the content navigator. So the thing about Members Monday is it's not a course like 30 for 30 where one session builds onto the next session. It's content where you can kind of jump in and jump out at any time. So each session on its own is going to be of value to you. So we have the content navigator. You can see all the sessions in there. All of the topics are stacked up, so you can go to exactly the topic and the session you want to go to. We've also got the Facebook group there, and you're part of our Members Monday community. I mean, you can always see in the chat the people who have the symbols by their names, they are our members, you know, and we've got a really good community. So click join below this video for more. Okay, let's get on to point number 3 here. Do you have a champion? So important here to have a champion. Let me know in the chat if you've ever felt this. Somebody emailed me about this point, actually. You've got to have a champion in the organization. If you're an external consultant, and I am assuming that you're going to be working as an external consultant, so you're not working for the organization, or even if you are in the company, but you're not in the particular department or division or project team that this Excel file relates to, you've got to have somebody in there, somebody internal, to make the case for Excel development. Strategically, this is so important. It's so important, in fact, that several times over the past 10 years, my champion has left the company or moved to another division, whatever it might be. And then after that, the Excel project becomes much, much, much more difficult. It's so important to have somebody in there who's making the case for Excel, making the case for Excel development. So these people, what kind of people are they generally? They tend to be kind of innovative and creative thinkers. You know, they're prepared to look outside of the organization or look outside of their immediate situation to find solutions. And often they're people who are quite good at Excel. They're people who appreciate the possibilities. We're always saying that on the channel, aren't we? We've got to appreciate the possibilities. Could we do this in Excel? So it's somebody who's thinking like that. And typically they're quite good at Excel themselves. So if you're lucky enough to meet somebody like that, they're your champion. You've got to work on that relationship. You've got to be responding, stays with you, and your champion is happy. You could have a long sequence of Excel VBA projects. And should that champion be promoted, should that champion move to an organization, guess what? They're going to take you with them. So a champion is so important. Let's see what Thomas says about this one. I always make sure I deal with one person directly. Good. And it's up to that person to expand the circle if she or he feels necessary. Absolutely. A common problem on Excel projects is that one person sets up the project. So I go in, have a meeting with one person, talk about the project. Great. We agree it. And then I'm working with somebody else. When the project starts, I'm working with somebody else. So this is another question I should add here, really. When we're talking about the champion, what is the role of the champion in the project? Hopefully the champion is going to be involved. Doesn't mean that they need to be involved every day. Doesn't mean they need to be intimately involved with the project, but they need to have oversight at least of the project. I had a situation about 4 or 5 years ago with a primary school, and I interacted with the head teacher, set up the project. Head teacher was on board. Head teacher was a creative thinker who appreciated the possibilities of Excel. And then he said, okay, you're going to work with my senior leadership team. So I was working with 2 or 3 senior leaders in the school who really weren't that way inclined, I would say, didn't have this kind of intuitive understanding of Excel. And it really turned out to be quite hard work in that respect. In fact, on that project, it was kind of a mitigated success, I would say, in the end. But I got an email from the head teacher saying, yeah, we're a little bit disappointed with this project. And it was just a case of the people I was working with, I wasn't really communicating well enough with me and with them, and they weren't really communicating with me well enough. They just weren't that committed to the project. These days, I'll be able to handle the situation much better. So I said to him, sorry you're disappointed. Let me have a meeting with you, not with the others. Let me meet you and explain the file to you. So I went and met my champion, explained the whole file. And guess what? He was saying, wow, I did not think it did this. Yeah, it does a lot more than I think. It's actually much better than I think. All comes with experience. That was in a fairly, the early days for Tiger, but hopefully, yeah, you hearing some of my experiences is going to help you there. So champions, so important. Let's see what is going down in the chat today. Yes, Michelle's channel, I recommend checking out Michelle's channel. She's been so supported over the years. Michelle says it's a Twitch channel, but about knitting, but I do some gaming too. And I also upload my videos to YouTube. Fantastic stuff, Michelle. So a Twitch knitting channel. This is brilliant stuff. So good to see you again, Michelle. And George from Portugal is with us. Welcome, George. And George has a question straight off the bat. Thank you, George. You said about wasted time with fake projects. Okay, that wouldn't have been the exact phrase I used, George, but I think you understand. Did any time happen with the opposite? You have declined a project, then got knowledge that is actually a great customer to work with? That's a good question, George. Reasons I would decline a project. Yeah, there's plenty of reasons. Often money is problematic. The way I position myself in the market is I'm not the cheapest in the market, but I offer the best service. In my view, everybody would say that, I suppose, but you can see from the YouTube channel, I know what I'm talking about, and I always give current client references and things like that to really differentiate myself. So I think I've certainly lost some projects because of that, because of price. But I can't think of a situation where I've lost a project or said no to a project and then I've heard about it being successful. I'll tell you a recent situation I had about 2 months ago. So last year I did a training day, 2 training days with a company fairly local to here. And then the same company contacted me this year. My champion contacted me and said, yeah, we've got some more work coming up. Can you have a look at the files? So I looked through the files. What did I not do? I didn't ask what's the context of this. I just assumed he'd want me to do the work. And then he got back to me, which I was surprised about, and said, listen, actually, you're bidding for this work with somebody else. Yeah. Which I was a bit annoyed about, to be honest. I think he could have disclosed that at an earlier stage. And in the end, I didn't get the project. So stuff like that does happen. And you've got to think how to manage those situations. That's another situation. I think I could have managed it better by asking more questions, like these questions, asking more questions up front. I think that's a situation where I thought I knew the client and I knew what he would want, but actually I didn't. And I feel he kind of outmaneuvered me a little bit in that situation. Although, to be honest, that's not how I think about business, about, negotiating and being outmaneuvered and stuff like that. But long term, you will get to know your customers, and you'll know if a customer needs help. You'll know if it's going to be a good project with a customer, and you'll get to a point eventually. And I have, after 3 or 4 years working with people, where it's a very smooth process, talking about the projects, scoping the projects, delivering the projects, and getting paid for the projects. It's a fairly smooth process. Peter, just getting into the chat there. Love the cats, just catching up. Was on a call. Good to have you with us, Peter, and welcome. Let's go on to point number 4 then. And I've touched on this already in the presentation, but how will the file be used? Absolutely vital. Don't assume, very dangerous to assume, that your customer understands how Excel should be used and that your customer understands how other software platforms would be used. Would it be better to use another software platform? I always ask these 2 questions. To what extent will the file be used collaboratively? And you know me, and you know my specialism. Remember, I think you've got to specialize in something in Excel. I specialize in Excel VBA. Now, if lots of people want to use the file at the same time, Excel VBA doesn't work at all in Excel Online, of course. So if you want to use the online version of Excel, then you can't really use VBA, and you probably shouldn't be going with me. So always understand to what extent do they want to use the file collaboratively. Now, Excel does have another language coming, which is like JavaScript, which is called Office Script. And that language will work with Excel Online. So that's something I'm kind of thinking about. I'm thinking about scaling up in that area. And the other question you have to ask is about data. How much data do they need the file to handle? Yeah, and if it's a large data set, as I said, more than a few 100,000 rows, then Excel might struggle with that. So there's 2 questions you've absolutely got to ask about the usage of the file. There's nothing worse, I know from bitter experience, nothing worse than building a beautiful Excel VBA application, send it to the client with your walkthrough video, really happy, and then the client says, oh, I opened it in Excel Online and it looks very different and nothing's working. Okay, I've been there. I've been there many times. Make sure you're asking these questions early, and then depending on what functionality you're using in Excel, can they use Excel Online at all? You've got to make these things clear. I've said in the notes there, deal with these issues early. So let's see what Thomas said here. Up to now, I've only dealt with situations where no collaboration with others will be required. Might have to rethink my strategy if the situation changes. Yeah, so good stuff, Thomas. I mean, if collaboration is required, it's still possible, but it requires a little bit of organization and awareness and proactivity on the part of the client. Plenty of times I've built VBA applications and they are used collaboratively. And thinking back to what I've mentioned in the stream, those method statement files I built, they were used collaboratively. But people have to understand they have to be downloaded to their desktop in order for people to get full value out of those files and probably to be able to use those files at all. So it can happen and people can get all of the benefits from Excel VBA, which we know are massive, but it does take, you've got to communicate well with the client, ask these questions, make sure the client understands, and are they prepared to put a little bit of extra effort in to communicate that to the people who will be using it collaboratively. Good. So there's question 4 there. Let me know, guys, any further questions in the chat today? Charles is here. So Charles, you have put a little emoji in the chat that looks like you've got your hand up, but maybe you're just saying hello. So hello, Charles, how are you? And does your wife still think you're the Excel guy? That's a good start. Make sure people in the house know that you're the Excel guy. And have you finished 30 for 30 yet, Charles? And Michelle, are you going to put a link to your Twitch profile? You're welcome to do that, Michelle. I will okay it if it comes through in the chat. Good. So let's move on to question 5 now. Quick summary, what we've covered so far. So we are saying, in order to make sure you're working with the right people, how did they find you? What's the current data landscape? What's the broader context? Are other systems being considered? Have you got a champion, somebody who's going to make your case internally for Excel development? How will the file be used? Is it going to be used collaboratively, or do they expect lots and lots of data to go into the file? Finally, and crucially, and I always say, don't shy away from this question. A theme through this presentation is this shouldn't be a one-way conversation, them just asking you questions. It should absolutely be a two-way conversation. Can you work together? It shouldn't feel like a job interview. So can they pay? And do I think you should just say, can you pay? Probably not, but you've got to find a way to phrase this diplomatically, but directly, say it in a candid way to make sure you're going to get paid. And then there's all kinds of other considerations here. You know, if you're working with someone for the first time, then you may want to ask for some payment up front. I often do that. If you're working with somebody overseas, then how is the payment going to work? And if I work with people overseas, I always get some money up front. I work with some customers here where I get paid before the project. Yeah. So these are all things for you to think about. That's really only in situations where I've worked with customers for some time though. But you've got to make sure you're de-risking this. Yeah, de-risking this. Where is the risk in this project? If you've completed the work and you haven't been paid at all the risk is with you. Conversely, if the client has paid you all the money and there's no work completed, all of the risk is with them. So just think about how to best distribute that risk. And there's a few things you can do. Companies in the UK, companies have they have to publish company accounts, and summaries of those accounts are accessible online for free. So you can go and have a look at the company accounts, and you don't have to be an accounting expert, but you could very easily Google or YouTube how to interpret a financial statement in order to understand what is the financial health of the company. And then it's absolutely okay to say, okay, who is going to make the decision on this project, on whether this project gets paid? You know, is it the person you're meeting with? If it's not the person you're meeting with, then is it their boss? You know, you really need to know these things, and asking about things like budgets can be helpful. You know, can I ask you, how is this project being funded? And they might say, yeah, we have an innovation budget that we have to use every year. You know, and this is another thing, you know, in March, although it didn't happen this year because of the global situation, but in March, before the end of the financial year, I always get a few phone calls from people, usually long-term clients, who are saying to me, listen, I have to spend this money in my budget. They don't say it in this many words, but they're looking to use money in their budget to show that it's used, and so they can get that budget allocated to them next year. So there's all kinds of things coming into play, and I'm saying you're entitled to know about at least a few of those things. Yeah. Does it mean you should go all Donald Trump and go all, I'm going to be a tough negotiator? Absolutely not. You can do this diplomatically and with charm and with kindness, but you have a right to know a few of these things. So make sure you ask them, can they actually pay for this project? Okay, into the chat here. Charles says, yes, that's a wave emoji. And yes, she does. Excellent. So Charles is the Excel guy in his house. Fantastic stuff. Charles says, almost halfway through 30 for 30. Good stuff. Yeah, Charles, I've been absolutely loving the comments. So thank you so much for those. And let's see what Thomas says about this point. Can they pay? So Thomas says, before committing to doing a project, I make sure a proper contract is drawn up and signed. I did not do that once and lost out. Yeah. So contracts, you know, this is a good point. And I don't usually have contracts on my projects. I do sometimes. I suppose I've got a kind of controversial view on contracts. In my first job, when I was working in Japan, a few of you might know, I started my career in Japan. I worked for 4 years there. I was always fascinated that business is always done without contracts there. So I didn't have an employment contract. And when we were doing deals with clients, there were very rarely any contracts in place. It was all just done on reputation and kind of gentleman's agreements, although I know that's a kind of sexist term. And I do think if you have a contract, yes, you may be covered, yeah, but you're only covered if you're prepared to pursue a legal case on that contract. Okay, so the fact you have a contract does not mean you're safe. Your safety is measured by your willingness to pursue them legally if they don't honor the contract, you see. So contracts is going to give you a bit more confidence probably, but it's not going to solve everything. And I know of situations where people like me, contractors, have had a contract and then the company just says, yeah, we can't pay you. Sorry. I mean, what are you actually going to do in that situation? Yeah, you can get legal advice. You can go to the courts, but that's going to take time and money. So anyway, just some thoughts for you on contracts. Another thought on contracts for me is it can change the dynamic of a relationship. Yeah. And let me give you one example. Some of you know I'm getting married this year, and our wedding's actually been cancelled because of this global situation. So we're dealing with lots of people getting things together for the wedding. And some people, there's no contract with them. Yeah, so they're providing things like flowers, entertainment, food. And other people, very early, they say to me, oh, here's the contract, and they haven't even got to know me. They haven't even asked questions about the wedding. What kind of wedding is it going to be? Straight away, they're getting a contract in front of you. That, to me, is not the way to do things, because you're changing the dynamic of a relationship to a very business-like relationship. And I suggest you have to base your relationship on genuine human interest in their situation. Your primary motivation has to be to help them, and to help them as a human being, to help them with their problems. If you can do that and convince them that you're trying to help them, that's your primary motivation, then introduce the contract later, I think that's okay. So yeah, I'm a bit skeptical about contracts. I'm saying they don't solve everything, and don't rely on them too early, because people might view you in a certain way for doing that. But I'm happy to acknowledge that's probably a minority view, and most people would say put a contract in place. Okay, let me know, guys. Any final questions in the chat? Thomas says, in South Africa, you need a contract to protect yourself to a certain extent. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about other people's situations, but I would say, again, a contract is only as useful as your willingness to take somebody to court if they don't honor the contract. Yeah, it's just something to think about. People can do it how they want. I don't care. I'm just giving you some thoughts though. Like, if they don't honor the contract, would you actually take legal action against them? That's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of money as well. So just some thoughts there, but people can do them however they see fit. Good. Let me know, guys. Any final questions in the chat? Let's go to our final point here. Yeah, this is another excellent point from Thomas. Find out if you can work off-site, or do they require you to be on-site during the initial stages of the project? Let's bring this into your screenshot here. Can you contact the person responsible at any time if you need additional information or help? Yes, 2 good points here. So where are you going to deliver the work? And probably the reason I haven't mentioned this so far is that I kind of automatically think I'm going to do it off-site. I'm going to do the work remotely. For me, the default option is that you work off-site, you work in your own office, or even at home, wherever it might be, because these days, obviously, it's quite easy to do things remotely. Having said that, there's a lot of power in being on site, in being seen, in having your face known. in the office. So I would say, if it's all possible, with all my customers, I make sure I do some stuff on site, particularly towards the beginning of the project. I'm saying, if you can do it perfectly well off site, take the time to visit them on site and to get yourself known. I've never had a situation where somebody said to me, we want you to do the project and we want you to do it on site on these particular days. I've never had that situation personally, but because that's much more like being an employee, being a full-time worker, I suppose, as opposed to being some kind of contractor. And the second point here, crucial. Can you contact the person responsible at any time if you need additional information or help? So I would suggest that's probably your champion. We've been speaking about champions in this presentation. So how available are they? And if they're super, super, super busy, that could be problematic. Although I say people are never busy, they just don't prioritize you. That's another way of thinking about things. So if you have a good champion, they're going to make time for you. So you need their contacts. And email's one thing, but this is why I say always establish a phone relationship. Get on the phone, particularly for the youngsters, particularly for the millennials. Get off the email, get on the phone and work on your phone manner if you're not confident on the phone. And start running your relationships on the phone because it's more personal. Can you contact the person responsible at any time if you need additional information or help? The final point here is a good way to run a project could be to put a recurring appointment in your calendar. Agree a recurring appointment. So that could be every week. It could be every 2 weeks. It could be every month. But it's easy to set up in Outlook or Google Calendar, whatever you're using. Just make an appointment, invite them, and then set it to recur every week, every 2 weeks, every month. That's a good way to run a project. So you're agreeing to catch up at those times. That's kind of a good way to establish minimum level involvement that you need in order for the project to be a success. Fantastic stuff. Right, let's go through the chat then. I think we've got just a few comments at the bottom here. Thomas says, when I was in the UK, I was amazed how business is done. In South Africa, you sign on every page, but in the UK, you only sign on the last page, my employment contract. There's certainly different cultural considerations coming into play. And, as I said, when I worked in Japan, I was really shocked, how much is done just on word of mouth. But thinking about my projects at the moment, I've got 5 or 6 going and only one of them has a contract at the moment. Everything else is done just on word of mouth, really. We might have some emails exchanged, but mainly it's just on word of mouth. On Friday, for example, I had half an hour on the phone with somebody. I had an hour doing a Zoom call with somebody, really understanding them. If you take the time to understand their situation and convince them that you care about them and you want to help, if you can do that, you probably won't need a contract. Seriously, get those things in the right order. Only start talking about contracts once your customer is convinced that you're emotionally committed to doing a good job on this project. Michelle says, congratulations, Chris. Don't worry, this pandemic won't last forever. Thank you very much, Michelle. Really appreciate that. Okay, guys, so do check out Members Monday. We are going to be going live on Monday. And let me tell you briefly about the direction of this channel. The mission for this channel is to provide an accessible and affordable alternative to business education. And over the next few months and years, I'm going to try to diversify the content so it's almost like an MBA. So you can get MBA type education here for a tiny fraction of the price. We're starting with Excel VBA data analysis. We're diversifying here. That's why this series is strategically significant, because it's a small diversification away from Excel into project management. I've got all kinds of experienced, fascinating and exciting people who want to come in and help out with the channel. So if that makes sense to you, if you like that vision, then get involved with a channel membership. Click join below this video for more. Okay, guys, so good to be able to hang out with you on a Saturday afternoon. I've had a great day, and this has been, if not one of the highlights, this has probably been the highlight of my day. So it's great to hang out with you guys. Tomorrow we'll have a static video release on Sunday. Then we'll be live 4 o'clock on Monday. That's 4 o'clock on Monday. Take care, guys. I'll see you then.